What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Happy Monday, y'all. It was a busy but fun weekend of Denver sports. Not so fun on the football side, though it was a competitive game. We'll get into that. We'll give some takeaways from that matchup. I'll talk about the quarterback position, which is up in flux at the moment for CSU football. This season just is never ending. We'll talk about the latest coaching rumors and national reports, and then we'll get into some hoops takeaways as well, because I thought Sunday's showing against Loyola-Chicago, first true road test for CSU men's basketball under Farokhmanesh, was a really encouraging step. This team is definitely gelling and meshing quicker than I would have anticipated coming in. Felt like they had a chance to be pretty good come, late February, March. Think that they might actually be right there in the mix for the entirety of the Mountain West slate, which would be a lot of fun. Shout out to our guy Ken in the Toyota chat. If you're rocking with us live like he is, give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Keep it lively. If you've got questions, comments, etc., I'll get to as many as we can over the course of the show. And if I don't get to it right away, my main man, Yaya, our super producer, can always star it, and we can come full circle at the end of the show. I wanted to just kind of first start by saying, while Saturday was a bummer, especially in what was a really epic weekend of Denver sports, I guess the Nuggets technically snapped it last night, but at one point, the Broncos, Avs, and Nuggets had combined for 21 straight victories. If you threw in CSU men's basketball in there, that's like 20-1 or 20-2 now in the month of November. Pretty crazy stuff. But I did really have a good sports weekend. It was kind of needed. The Broncos game was awesome. Mile High was electric, was one of those moments that reminded me I do, in fact, love this sport as long as this season has been. But I am happy, albeit at our expense, obviously, for the New Mexico fans. Nobody has had a rougher couple years than they have as far as the transfer portal and coaching carousel goes. I'm not going to go through all of that again, but I've always kind of had a soft spot for New Mexico. I personally really enjoy Albuquerque. I love the food down there. I'm going to be a little bit bummed, to not play them with as much consistency in the Pac-12. I do hope that they play yearly in basketball. I think there's, and honestly, frequently in football as well, it's a good, cheap non-conference game. If you're going to play schools like, UTSA and UTEP like CSU has the last couple of years, why not throw a team like New Mexico in there? But they've just had a rough spot. And I think it's one of the more fun storylines in college football this year. I am curious to see how it plays out. The more they win, the more real the likelihood of a guy like Jason Eck getting poached is. But they have been a very cool story. They've been a very competitive team. They didn't play all that great against CSU. We'll get into it. But it is a fun storyline. And I don't know. There's just so much shared history. CD Sticks says New Mexico is the one team I'm legit sad about losing. Felt like a sibling school. I mean, you look back at the shared history between these schools, going all the way back to the WAC. There's just always been a steady relationship between the two athletic departments. So again, I do think there's a good chance that we still see, CSU play UNM and football, and especially basketball and some of the other sports moving forward. But it was weird, given that this was the last Mountain West matchup. The Air Force game in a couple weeks is going to be weird in that sense as well. Obviously, the The winning streak over UNM comes to an end. It had been almost 16 years. Jokingly went through some of the pop culture stuff on Friday's show to point out exactly how long it had been. Movies like The Blind Side were in theaters, and like American Idol was still big. It was genuinely crazy, the streak that CSU was able to sustain against them, especially being conference foes and largely playing every year. You had a couple of years here and there where you didn't play. 2020 was obviously its own deal because of COVID, but to beat a team 13 straight times the way CSU did, it's pretty remarkable. Just the likelihood of it is pretty insane. But you knew that streak was going to snap at some point. The Rams probably had 4 or 5 that could have gone the other way during that streak that more or less were coin flip outcomes, and they were on the right side of it. This time around, I do feel like CSU very easily could have won a wonky game against New Mexico. Again, didn't really feel like the Lobos played all that great against the Rams. They had some turnover issues, obviously. Defensively, gave up a couple of chunk plays in the second half after the game was seemingly out of reach. But I guess I got to credit the heart of the guys in this matchup. They really are in a brutal spot. I've most certainly been critical of the outcomes this year, and you have to be. I mean, all of the results have to count for something, and this team has underperformed due to a variety of reasons: injuries, coaching change. It's been wonky in so many different ways, but they've underperformed more than just about any team that I can remember in the last at least decade, since I've covered the team, probably longer. But to fight the way that they did in this one, it was admirable. Andrew Lorich, recovering 3 fumbles is just crazy. Jay Spella continuing to make plays. Owen Long, Lloyd Avant and Curry, like all these guys, the guys that have chosen to stick around, they do deserve respect, and they deserve some credit here, especially given how just emotionally draining this season has been. I mean, as tough as it has been on the fan base, you got to imagine how brutal of an experience this has been for the guys in the locker room. Nobody wants to win more than them. Nobody would rather be on a winning team than those guys out there. But it has been really tough, and I am glad that the Rams at least showed a little bit of backbone, a little bit of fight, because that first half was pretty exhausting, and we'll get into some of the offensive figures and then the stats and stuff. But I had the first half of a column written that I ended up kind of throwing out because they did show some fight and get back into it. But it was a fitting finish in what's been a nightmare of a season. You had some opportunities. You had an opportunity to, grind one out, and just couldn't make enough plays. Too many self-inflicted wounds, which has been the story for CSU, as has injuries. I mean, I think when you look at the state of both the offensive and the defensive line at this point, you can feel what's been a really rough year in terms of injury luck, just all the guys that they've lost. It's been tough, and that would have been a tough spot had BFN stuck around and had a better season, had Jay Norvell still been in the picture. I mean, there are years where you're just going to have bad luck in that instance when it comes to injuries. Any sport, sometimes it's just one of those seasons. It has been that way for CSU. Maybe you've got to look in the mirror and reflect on some things. I know John Weber's talked about that. Maybe there's some things they can do in the off season and in terms of, changing the strength program or something like that. I don't know. There's a million different things you could try and fixate on when it comes to why this season has gone the way that it has. But one of the biggest reasons, obviously, has been the fact that they have not been able to figure it out at the quarterback position. And now we're in a spot going into the last 2 games of the season where it's unclear who is going to start. It sounded like the plan anyways was to play both of those guys in that game against New Mexico, which, for the record, I'm against. A 2-quarterback system by design very rarely is going to work. I know that there actually are some offenses that have been able to pull it off. Troy Taylor a couple of years ago at Sac State kind of did that. He had more of like a dual threat mobile quarterback and also a guy who would throw the ball, and they were able to strike that balance. And for whatever reason it didn't seem to throw those guys out of rhythm. It didn't seem to disrupt the offense in any way. But for the majority of football teams that I've seen that have tried to go with the platoon approach at quarterback, it really just ends up taking both guys out of a rhythm. Now, I understand that the staff is in a tough spot from the sense that neither of these guys have really separated themselves. They both had moments. They both had struggles. I think based on what we've seen to this point, these quarterbacks kind of are who we thought they were, kind of are as advertised. Brousseau, more of a traditional pocket passer, has had to scamper around a little bit just because the O-line has struggled in front of him. But ideally, more of a pocket passer. Guy's going to stand in there, be a game manager, make good decisions with the football. He maybe doesn't have the same raw tools physically as, say, Braden Fowler-Nicolosi or even Darius Curry. Curry does have those raw tools, maybe a little bit undersized, but has certainly shown a willingness to rip the ball into some tougher spaces that Brousseau has not. That's both good and bad. I mean, I talked about Curry and why I had some skepticism of him being ready to be a starting quarterback based on what I had seen in practice over the last year and a half. And I think we've kind of seen that play out in his time on the field. He has these flashes where you could see if everything came together, this guy could be a lot of fun. Obviously he's able to extend the play a little bit. He is a good athlete. He's got a strong arm. Also turnover prone. I mean, 3 interceptions in this game. 2 of them were pretty bad. At times a little bit erratic when it comes to his ball placement and accuracy, but also makes some throws that, Jackson hasn't been able to. And you could get into the same reasons why I sold, the potential of BFN is that if everything were to come together, the raw tools are really intriguing. And that is the case with Darius. I just didn't want him to get thrown into a bad spot. Obviously, going out onto the field with a receiving core, which is struggling, that's on its 3rd offensive play caller, and now is an offensive line that's missing multiple starters. That's not exactly putting a young quarterback in an opportunistic position. It's not putting him in a spot where he's being set up for success. And at this point, I think especially if Brousseau is dinged up, I would just give the keys to Darius. I think we know who Jackson is. We know what he is as a quarterback. We know what he isn't as a quarterback. With Darius, he just needs experience. He needs time to develop. But it's not like the offense is just going to flip a switch. And that's kind of what I've been saying now for a month, regardless of whether you were going from BFN to Brousseau or Brousseau to Darius. This offense is fundamentally flawed in so many different ways. And it's not like all of a sudden we're going to see a competent, lethal group with any type of consistency. There was maybe a little bit of hope early on in conference play after what they did late in that San Diego State game, as well as obviously the flukiest showing of them all, which was the Fresno State game. But I would give the keys to a young guy just to see what he can do, give him an opportunity to get some experience. Brousseau has some film. At this point, Curry deserves that opportunity, given the fact that he's stuck around. And while I do think that the issues are real when it comes to the erraticism with his accuracy and some of the turnover stuff, he's also willing to make some throws and that can potentially create some big plays for you in a way that the offense just hasn't had it. And with how stagnant they've been, it's been such a brutal process to watch. Like I'll take a guy who's going to make some mistakes, but at the very least is going to take some cuts at the plate. Because at this point, what do you have to lose? I mean, the season is over. You're staring down the barrel of a 2-10 finish. If nothing else, maybe a young athletic quarterback can create a couple of big throws down the field. Maybe you break him, score some points. Maybe he's able to do some stuff with his legs. And against a struggling Boise State offense and then an Air Force defense, which has kind of been Swiss cheese this year, you never know. Maybe you could make something happen against some 2 teams who are kind of trending the wrong direction themselves. So that's where I'm at with the quarterback spot. I would give him the keys and I would just let him lean into it, assuming that he's able to stay healthy. We'll have to see what happens with Brousseau. If he can't go, I don't know. At that point, if you were to have both those guys go down, you go to Bullock. I don't know. It'd be a very weird spot. Would hate to see that, but I do think the the very clear outcome in all of this is that CSU is going to have to bring multiple quarterbacks in this offseason to compete. And maybe that's against Darius. Maybe he ends up going elsewhere. I don't know. But at this point, if you are going to give the young guy a shot, give him the keys and let him rip. Don't go back and forth. Don't put him on the field, take him off the field. It's hard to get in a rhythm as a young quarterback, and it's hard to see the field that way. So if you are going to lean into it and understand that there's going to be some mistakes and probably some turnovers that come with it, but you also might spark, some plays and score some points like they did in that second half against New Mexico, because neither of the defenses that they're facing to close out the year here are crazy imposing. So that's where I'm at. Both of them are good kids. I credit Brousseau and Curry for their toughness. It's been a really tough season. They have not had a lot of help out there. And I want to be very clear with that, because as critical of Jackson as I have been at times this year, this season's not on him. The offensive woes are not on him. He's been thrown into a winless, impossible position. And unfortunately, that's really going to be the case for whoever is under center at this point. This is a lost season, and it's very unfortunate it played out that way. But fortunately, the future looks a little bit brighter. I'm not going to focus that in depth on the New Mexico game at this point. It's already Tuesday, but I will give a couple more takeaways here in just a second. Let me shout out a couple of partners, and then we'll get into that, and we'll talk about some coaching rumors. Whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style. They, of course, are our presenting sponsor here on the DNVR Rams podcast. Got a lot of love for them. Got a couple of hats here on the set. I rock them all the time. If you're looking for gear to make your brand stand apart from the crowd, Branded Bills has you covered with the best custom headwear. We have both DNVR and ALLCITY network hats through them. They're super comfortable, really versatile, that athletic wear material, so they're breathable, out on the golf course or something like that, but still stylish enough. It's not going to be weird if you're wearing them with a polo or something like that. They have a partnership with CSU as part of their on-campus collection, also co-founded by a CSU alum. You love that. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Hey, Colorado, we've got the holiday season coming up. There's no better place to get the sports fan in your life hooked up than Dick's Sporting Goods. They've got all of the hottest apparel in town, plus the best footwear from top brands like Nike, Adidas Originals, Hoka, DNVR, and more. Score the latest equipment for baseball, football, soccer, basketball, golf, all your tailgating essentials. If you find a lower price, they will match it with their best price guarantee. Get your gear fast with free curbside pickup at your nearest store or easy shipping from Dicks.com, because every season starts at Dick's. All right, let's keep this rolling here. Love to see how active the Toyota chat is. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I know it's been a tough year, but at the very least, we've got some hope to talk about moving forward. The coaching stuff and basketball, obviously, awesome. Ken says basketball school in the Toyota chat. We'll get into that. Aaron in the Toyota chat says, in my opinion, Curry has more long-term potential than Jackson in a wasted season. Let's see him cook. Then we bring in a few transfers for open competition next year. I tend to agree with you. I think in an ideal situation, that's probably the best case outcome moving forward. I would have no issues if both of those guys stuck around. Competition and having experience in your quarterback room is always a strong selling point. But if I were to roll the dice or be a betting man on one of these guys and what their long-term potential is, I certainly think that Curry and his raw tools are more intriguing. A lot like what I said with Braden Fowler-Nicolosi, which is why the staff had been so committed to him these last couple of years and stubborn despite some of his struggles and the inconsistencies with his development, which had a lot of different factors. If you listen to the show, I've done these rants a million times. I don't want to get too repetitive on you, but kind of wrapping up with some thoughts on this New Mexico game. Another slow start offensively, really brutal in that aspect. The defense played their ass off, probably deserved a win. The offense did some stuff late that at least gave the Rams a puncher's chance at pulling off the upset, but really felt like failing to capitalize on those first couple of fumbles were kind of this season in a nutshell. You had good field position a couple of different times and just kept shooting yourself in the foot. The Rams could not run the football to save their life in this game. They averaged about a half a yard per carry, got killed in the trenches on that side of the ball, stopped the run pretty effectively. Actually really liked what I saw from CSU and that front seven against a pretty strong, New Mexico rushing attack. Jack Lane, their quarterback, made some plays, did enough to get UNM the home win. But the Rams, they just, especially early on in that game, felt like they could not get anything going offensively. 223 of their 299 yards ultimately came in the second half. So that tells you, where this offense is at. And that's just been, unfortunately, too consistently the issue. The Rams have 21 scoreless quarters this season. They have 6 scoreless halves with 3 different offensive play callers. They're trending the wrong direction. Jay Norvell coached, or with Jay Norvell calling the plays, CSU averaged 15.3 points per game. With Matt Mumme calling plays, they averaged 30.7 points per game, though those numbers were a little bit skewed given that he was the play caller for Fresno State. But still, both of CSU's highest scoring outcomes have been with him calling the plays. And then with Grant Chestnut, it has been 9 points per game. And that was with the second half explosion. When I did these numbers originally at halftime, again, I had a kind of a spicy column that I ended up deciding to scrap just because at this point, this season's over and we know these guys aren't going to be back. I don't really feel like there's a whole lot of point in going with like the hot take at this point. Like, it is what it is. Anyways, the offense was averaging like 3.3 points per game with him as the play caller at the half. Obviously, the 17 points they were able to score in the third and fourth quarter brought it up a little bit, but not exactly looking like a decision that was all that wise. I understood the reasoning of Tyson Summers wanting to go with one of his buddies, somebody who he had some familiarity with, kind of transitioning from Norvell guys to his guys if he is going to be the coach in the interim. I understand that, but it just has not. It has not been good. They were 0-7 on third down in the first half, did go 5-9 on third down in the second half after they basically abandoned the run game. I think they only had 4 rushing attempts in that fourth quarter, like 6 or 7 in the third quarter. To CSU's credit, able to create a little bit of offense, get that Rocky Beers touchdown. He now has 5 receiving touchdowns on the season. He's one away from tying Kevon Cartwright, Corey Sperry, and Dallin Holker for the program record for single season touchdowns by a CSU tight end. All those guys had 6. Kind of crazy that given the tight end CSU's had, obviously Trey McBride, Joel Dreesen, but even Kelly McGregor and some of those other guys, Crockett Gilmore, that 6 is only the record, but could be kind of a small win for a cool guy. Rocky Beers, despite this season not going how he would have hoped for, has been one of the few consistent pieces this offense has had this year. Admirable from him, despite everything going on. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to win very much when you average 0.5 yards per carry. Puts the quarterback in a really tough spot, especially a young guy, especially with receivers who are struggling to get open. Did feel like DC was able to spread the love a little bit better than Jackson was, get some guys like Tay Lanier, Tommy Maher, and some of those other receivers involved who really had not been in the equation much at all these last couple of weeks. You got to credit the defense for the way they were able to get off the field and the fact that they were able to recover all those fumbles. I mean, 5 different individuals forcing a fumble is crazy enough, but to recover 4 of them, really impressive. Again, those guys deserve to win, as did the punter, Brian Hansen. They're in a tough spot. I've been really critical, but the guys that have stuck around, they deserve credit for that. Avant breaking that screen late in the game, that's all heart. Lorich, recovering multiple fumbles, that's all heart. Darius Curry being out there, taking hits, being willing to rip it downfield despite, this season being disaster, that's all heart. And I will always appreciate that. Obviously, this isn't rec league. This isn't 12-year-old football. The outcomes do matter. It's not just about having fun, but wanted to add that in for context, especially given how hard I have been on this team this year. Just a couple of helmet stickers before we move on. Darius Curry gave Lloyd Avant a helmet sticker for that 41-yard touchdown. You see the juice he has. You see why he's intriguing. Owen Long, another 12-tackle game. Jace Bella continuing to force turnovers. Love to see it. One of the cooler stories on the team. Andrew Lorich, one of my favorite players on the roster, guy who maybe occasionally goes too far, might pick up an unsportsmanlike, a roughing or something like that. But give me D linemen like him every day of the week. Rocky Beers and Brian Hansen as well. So shout out to all of those guys. Tough outcome. Bummer to see the streak end. We'll see what happens these last couple of weeks. We've got a lot of people in the Toyota chat asking about the most recent CSU football commit and what that might mean for the future of the program. If you missed it, the Rams flipped Justin Lewis. He is a 6'2", 165-pound cornerback at a Rancho Cucamonga High School. Had a lot of P4 offers, which was interesting. Had some interest from teams like Louisville and CU and really all over from the major leagues. He was, again, committed to UCLA, but ends up flipping to CSU, which is interesting. Both the Toyota chat as well as the message boards, Ram Nation, Twitter, have been rampant with speculation. What does this mean? Does this mean Tim Skipper to CSU, trying to, piece the little clues together there? That feels like a bit of a reach to me. Who knows? Maybe that could be the case. I would say that if it were that close to being a done deal, to where Skipper had the deal and was getting guys to flip, I would think we would have heard more about it by now. That's just me. I would think at least me or Kevin would have heard something about that. That said, I've been pretty honest about all of this. I think that there's a lot of intriguing options on the table for CSU this year as far as risers from the FCS level, somebody like a Brent Vigen or a Tim Polasek, or even, Tim Plow, who they are reportedly, who they've reportedly taken a look at. I think there's a lot of intriguing, coordinators, whether it's like a Mike Shanahan at Indiana, Colin Klein, Texas A&M, who reportedly is receiving interest from both CSU and Oklahoma State, according to CBS. I personally believe that Klein, at least at the beginning of this, was kind of their top target coming in, and I still think he may be. But just be careful. Don't get too carried away based on, small things. I know we're all desperate for this to come to an end, to get some type of resolution here. Usually coaching searches are like a week and a half tops, and because of the in-season firing, it's going to be more like 6 weeks, and we're all just desperate to get some type of closure with this process. But you got to remember that a lot of the national reports are people getting information through agents that they don't really vet all that consistently. Obviously, the Cordell Stewart stuff is the best instance of that, and our girl Josina really leaning into the bit with her Shedeur Sanders tweets this weekend. That was hilarious. That was something else. I'm not even going to get into all that, but just super funny. But just be careful. I will say Justin Lewis, really intriguing prospect. If that were to mean that my guy Skip, who I have a personal relationship with going back over a decade now, were to get the gig, that'd be pretty cool. But just easy there. I did also see on Ram Nation, as Taylor's mentioning here in the Toyota chat, and I have heard this from someone else, that Weber has guaranteed some scholarship offers. I can't speak to the validity of that. I do know that it is a really wonky spot. It wouldn't be shocking, I guess. But I don't know. I think you kind of have to give your new coach full reins to make roster decisions. That's a little bit harsh and maybe heartless of me in this process. I understand that there are a lot of kids that get offers that get pulled last minute, and that puts them in a tough spot. And I'm not necessarily advocating for that, but that would be unappealing to me as a potential coaching candidate, to not have the full control to manage my roster, even if I get the job in a spot where the recruiting class is going to be pretty slim. Yeah, I did think that was interesting, though. I saw some of that stuff too. CSU adds Justin Lewis, we'll see. I'm going to obviously talk about recruiting these next couple of weeks, but until we get to signing day, with how much is still moving behind the scenes, I kind of have a feeling there's going to be a lot of commits, decommits. You flip Justin Lewis, but you lose Jace Winchester and Alex Brewer, a couple of offensive line commits. Winchester, a local guy, he's going to Idaho now. Alex Brewer, guy out of Sequoia, Georgia, he is now committed to Navy. You lose the linebacker. I'm drawing a blank on his name to Utah State, the kid out of California. But it's a wonky time for recruiting right now, and I will do some digging this week between now and Friday's show to see if I can get a little bit more clear-cut idea of how that process has worked. I did ask Tyson Summers a couple weeks ago what that process was like, and he didn't really give me anything concrete, but weird spot. Weird spot. Aaron Harris in the Toyota chat saying Spencer Danielson said Maddox Madsen is out for the game this weekend. That is big for the Rams. They looked pretty rough offensively last weekend. Boise did against great defense, probably the best defense in the league in San Diego State. But still, we're going to get into a Mountain West power ranking. Then we're going to transition the conversation to hoops. If you've got any questions, comments, etc., throw it my way. We'll get to as many as we can. I do want to shout out real quick our friends at Game Time. I love Game Time because they have an awesome variety of tickets that they offer. You can get your standard sporting events, obviously, but also, they've got stand-up comedy, they've got theater, they've got all kinds of stuff on there. But what's big time about Game Time is they give the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps. Incredibly easy to use, super intuitive. The Game Time guarantee means you'll trust that you get 100% authentic tickets on time and at the best price. Plus, the fees are always included in the price you see. I hate those apps that make it seem like you're getting a good deal, and then all of a sudden, service fee and a bonus fee and you bought tickets on a Wednesday fee, and it adds like 80%. It's ridiculous. The price you see, that's the price you pay with Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying NCAA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. I also encourage y'all to choose chill, just like our friends at Coors Light do. It's about to get chaotic for a lot of us out there. As much as I love the holiday season, I'm a big Thanksgiving guy, although I don't really get to celebrate it with my family anymore because of work. I am a big Christmas guy, and I'm sap with the Christmas tree and all that. It's a process, trying to balance having to see both sides of the family and getting gifts for everyone and just everything that goes into it. You see, as you get older, all that Christmas magic, that's really just the product of your parents busting their ass or your family members busting their ass. But it can bring you down. It can be stressful. It can be chaotic. It can be tiring. You got to do the little things to put yourself in that chill state of mind. Once you do, kick back, relax, throw on the game, maybe throw on some classic tunes, whatever you're into. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door. Visit CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Beer. All right. Just kind of a brief update. If you have not kept up with the interwebs since Friday's show, Kevin Lytle reporting that CSU and Matt Lubick have discussed the job. The level of seriousness with which those conversations were, that's unknown at this point. But I do think that's interesting. I do think that he's maybe a more viable, realistic candidate in this process than he had ever been previously. I do think that Sonny has given him the nod of approval, which I had always heard was kind of not the case. I do think that there's some weirdness that potentially comes with going with the Lubick just based on creating unrealistic expectations, potentially setting yourself up for failure. But I do think he's a brilliant offensive mind, and I do think that he would garner as much support from the big wig donors, which that's important. You need support in all of this. I think guys like him and Clint Kubiak, who I don't think is realistic at this point, because I think he's going to get an NFL job, I think they would probably put you in a position to get the most financial support from the donors. After that, I think you go with guys like Colin Klein, assuming that you'd be able to land him. It would be interesting to me with a guy like Colin Klein where his priorities are at. Is Oklahoma State as good of a job as it once was in the modern Big 12? I guess in some sense you could argue that Oklahoma and Texas, with them out of the picture, could you be in the conversation with like a Texas Tech as one of the flagship teams to kind of carry that brand moving forward potentially? In the NIL era, feels like you're trying to compete against programs with far more money than you. Is your path to the playoff easier at a school potentially like CSU or even South Florida? Like if South Florida were to open up, then say in Oklahoma State, I think it's at least a debate in all of this. I also think they probably have more money initially as far as, bottom line in your paycheck goes. But like, is that all that you're seeking? Is a raise? You're already making a couple million a year at Texas A&M. They would pay you twice that just to stay as their OC. So if you want to be a successful head coach, I think finding the right fit, finding an opportunity you have to succeed with some consistency is an important factor. CBS Sports is reporting that Bob Chesney is the favorite to land the UCLA gig, which is interesting for CSU if you're going to put on your conspiracy hats. That could mean that somebody like Skipper or Neuheisel even could be in the mix at CSU, maybe a combo deal. Who knows? They also report that CSU has looked at Brian Harsin, the former Boise State coach, former Auburn coach, currently the OC at Cal. He would make a lot of sense just given his history, as well as some names that surprised me a little bit. Washington OC Jimmy Doherty and Georgia DB's coach Dante Williams. I would be shocked if they went with somebody who at the very least, or who has, never been a coordinator at the very least. I guess you never know, if you're really betting on a rising star. I'm so skeptical a lot of these national reports because I think a lot of the information is just posturing by agents. But I do think that James Franklin reportedly landing the Va Tech gig is good because that's one of the big key dominoes here. I think Lane Kiffin is probably the biggest once he either decides to stay at Ole Miss or goes to probably LSU or Florida. I have a hard time seeing him leave the SEC at this point. And then those other schools can react accordingly. Then I think we're going to start to see, a lot of these pieces fall with a lot more speed here. But I do hope that CSU is able to get a coach in place at the very latest by like college football championship weekend, like the week after the regular season. But I don't know. We'll see. I've read that they've kind of narrowed it down. I've heard somewhat similar things, but I'm pretty skeptical because I've been impressed with how much of this information has been kept pretty tight in-house, which really was not the case as much the last couple times around. Norvell ended up being a surprising hire, but I think we knew a lot of the realistic candidates. And the time before that, I mean, they were set to hire Butch Jones. I knew that. Kevin knew that. And then it fell apart at the last second. This one has been a little bit tougher to come by. And I think that's a good thing. I think that speaks to the stability of the athletic department under Weber. And I also think it speaks to the respect that they have for him, which was maybe not always the case in previous regimes, and which is what made it easier for people like me to get more information. But I will update as soon as I have anything that I trust. I just want to be really careful and make sure I'm not floating a bunch of nonsense just because some guy, said it in a national report. That's kind of where I'm at. But Dante Williams, as people are saying in the Toyota chat, is considered a dynamite recruiter. He was the interim head coach at USC. I guess I did not know that at one point. I don't think he's like a bad name or shocking by any means. I just think that it's a big gamble. It's a big risk. I mean, the jump even just going from play caller to head coach is a massive jump in responsibility, but you're skipping 2-3 steps at that point. That's not to say that you couldn't do it and be successful, especially if you put a good staff around you who you empower and stuff like that. But yeah, Aaron says that CBS article was so poorly written. I have no idea what to take from it. It was very odd. It kind of felt like they didn't have a ton of info about CSU, but it was an opening, so they were kind of just like, oh, let's throw it out there and kind of see what happens. John McGinley says, a little bit easier to be the best recruiter in the nation at USC and Georgia, no doubt. I mean, that's one of the things that I've always said about Tony Alford, and that's not to diminish his accomplishments or speak ill of him or anything like that. I don't know Tony. Obviously, as an alum, I have a lot of respect for him and what he's gone on to do. He's had an incredible career as a position coach. He is very much revered nationally as a great recruiter, but I think it's easier to land guys at Ohio State and Michigan than it is at places like CSU. I'm more inclined to lean into the type of guys who are great developers, who are able to do more with less, who get guys into their program, who coach them up and make them better football players, which I think has been an element that's kind of been lacking the at least last couple of years. I don't think there's been a lot of growth. There've been guys with intriguing raw skills, raw talent, probably more tools than CSU had in the past, but guys weren't getting better as they stayed in the program, and that's an issue that needs to change moving forward. All right, the updated Mountain West football power ranking. I know you guys are just dying to get into it. Oh man, where is CSU this time around? Just dying with anticipation, on the edge of my seat. Let's get into it. I've got a new number 12. If you missed it, Nevada won a game. Not only did they win a game, they beat the shit out of San Jose State this past week. And I think it was 55-10 or something like that. Throttled them. Absolutely kick their teeth in. I don't know what to make of San Jose State. They've been all over the place this year. They beat Hawaii a couple weeks ago, which is as good of a conference win as anybody in the league, up there with like CSU over Fresno over Boise. And then they do stuff like this. But congratulations to the Nevada Wolfpack. They win their first conference game of the Jeff Choate era. It's been a long process for them. I wonder how many conference games they could hypothetically win in 3 or 4 years. I'll never get over that post-game quote that he had last season, being, we're a couple years away from beating teams like CSU or whatever it was. Truly embarrassing, but good for Reno. It's been rough. You're out of the bottom spot for the second time this season. We got San Jose State at 12 and Nevada 11 for beating them. CSU jumps to 10. Basically because San Jose State looked so bad against Nevada that they had to fall to the bottom spot, and CSU at least showed a little bit of life. Wyoming 9, same deal. They move a spot up out of default. Air Force stays the same at number 8, despite a frustrating loss at UConn. Utah State at 7. Had a chance to beat UNLV, blew it. UNLV continues to skank out the ugliest, most fluky wins. I admit that there's an element of me that's just rooting against them because I was not high on them in the preseason. And I'm frustrated that they seem to have a horseshoe, up their keister. But being fair to them, winning games is a skill. Finding ways to make just enough plays, that is a skill to an extent. I think you'll see a regression to the mean at some point. But I'm not trying to be a hater just for the sake of being a hater, although I cannot stand watching that defense. Anyways, Boise State at 6. They have looked lifeless without Maddox Madsen at quarterback. New Mexico at 5. Top 4 doesn't change a ton. Fresno 4. UNLV 3. Hawaii 2. And San Diego State 1. That's the thing I struggled with the most. I do think San Diego State and Hawaii are the best teams in the league. I think San Diego State beating Boise State as convincingly as they did, that's enough to get them in the top spot. I know that Hawaii beat San Diego State head-to-head pretty convincingly. On the island, though, I always kind of take some results with a grain of salt. I would like to see a rematch between those two in the conference championship game, because I think they are the best 2 teams in the league. I think they're the most complete football teams, at least. Fresno State, they've had their moments. UNLV, they're the most explosive offensively. But Hawaii and San Diego State are far more consistent defensively, more complete football teams, more fundamentally sound. So that's where I'm at with the league. If you want just a pure standings, you can get that by going to the standings. But I do think that if San Diego State and Hawaii played again, San Diego State would win. But I have a lot of love for what Timmy Chang and the Warriors are doing. I always kind of root for Hawaii anyways, but especially with Timmy Chang there, they're an easy group to get behind. Yeah, Aaron in the Toyota chat says, build the Choate statue, you cowards. Do it, a double dog, dare you. Some week 13 picks on the football slate. Give me Hawaii to cover 2.5 at UNLV. Give me Hawaii to win that game outright. I think that it'll be kind of a fun back and forth game. I could see a world in which UNLV puts up too many points. If UNLV or if Hawaii has some turnover issues, that could be an issue. But I also think they're going to be able to move the ball all day long against that Swiss cheese of a UNLV defense. Give me CSU to cover the 16.5 at Boise State. I think they probably lose this game by double digits. I don't know if Boise State can score 17 points right now. If the Rams defense plays like they did against New Mexico, this might actually be a game CSU could win just because Boise is so broken right now. And then give me San Diego State to cover the 11.5 against San Jose State. Has me a little bit nervous just because San Jose State has been so all over the place. But I feel like last week will be the straw that broke the camel's back with them, and with San Diego State needing to win out, to cement their place in the conference championship game and the conference championship game, and give them at least a small, glimmer of hope at trying to reach the playoff. They've got to win it. Give me a motivated San Diego State to cover that 11.5. Against a San Jose State team who's reeling. They just fired their defensive coordinator and special teams coordinator. That's never a good sign when coaches start dumping position coaches. It's always the easiest scapegoat scenario. Somebody's got to go. It's not going to be me. You tell you what, I like my job, but somebody's got to pay for this. Never a good spot for a football team. All right, let's talk hoops before we get out of here, because it's far more fun to be a CSU basketball fan than it is to be a CSU football fan at the moment. Men's basketball 4-0 on the year after taking care of business against a Loyola-Chicago team who admittedly is not as good as I thought they would be. But to go out on the road and to be up 12 at halftime and to lead by as much as 26 on the road, never have it get within single digits in the second half, that's impressive. That's impressive if you do it against a team like Fresno State, let alone against a team like Loyola, who has a good coach and has a couple of intriguing pieces. Like Ola Joseph was a P4 guy that CSU actually went after a couple of times. Minnesota kid, thought he might end up with the Gophers. But I loved the killer instinct that the Rams showed in this win. I had to rewatch the game yesterday. I was at the Broncos game Sunday, unfortunate timing, and then I had an Avs game Sunday night. But so I was watching it on ESPN Plus on the phone. When I rewatched it Sunday afternoon, I was surprised I was able to. With Fubo, you get some random like marquee sports network, which is based out of Chicago, but pleasantly I was able to rewatch it, kind of take some more in-depth notes. I was impressed again with the killer instinct they showed in this one. I thought Brandon Recksteiner in particular was awesome. He went into his bag. He had a couple of really, really nice finishes where he drove and was able to stop, pivot, finish off the glass. Had another one where he kind of hit a little fadeaway floater type shot. 3 of 3 from deep, had 15 points in 10 minutes in that second half. The Rams able to extend that lead from 12 at the break to as much as 26. That was the difference in the game. They were able to withstand the nice little run from Loyola. Credit them for not just rolling over and losing by 30 on their home floor, but they had to go 9 of 10 to close the game, 9 of 10 from the field to even have like a shouting chance of being close to CSU. Again, never got within single digits. Got a little sluggish at times at the end of the first and the second half offensively. I think some of that had to do with CSU maybe being a little too 3-point happy. They take a ton of threes. There's definitely room for growth on both ends of the floor. But I do worry at times, like 55% of their attempts from the floor are 3-pointers. That's the 4th most in college basketball in terms of percentage. It's a few too many for me, I do wonder if once you get Bemba back out there, if maybe that kind of helps you establish a little bit more of a consistent presence in the paint. It's not that they don't attack the hoop, like Kerry Booth, Jorgensen, those guys get some looks down there. We've seen, Pasquarelli and some of these other guys unafraid to put the ball on the floor and attack. It's not that they don't have the ability, but they do take a lot of threes, and their defense, they're good looks, they're open, they're in rhythm. CSU's always taken a lot of threes, but I do wonder in a game where they're not falling, is this team able to, kind of adjust enough and find ways to create enough offensive production? I do think that they've gotten to the line a lot this year, which has been big. Let me see what their free throw numbers were in this game. They're averaging like 30 attempts at one point this season. 19 attempts, not as many as the last couple of home games, probably product of being on the road as well. Still shooting free throws well, which is big. One of the best free throw shooting teams in the country right now, which is awesome. And while I'm nitpicking a little bit about being a little three happy, with as many guys on the floor that are able to hit them with consistency, it's tough to really fault them. I mean, you see Rex Steiner's hot hand yesterday. Pasquarelli's been awesome this year, as I thought he would be. But Kerry Booth has shot the ball pretty well from three-point. Rex Steiner, or Jorgensen, has the ability to step out and stretch the floor. They've got a lot of guys. Jace Butler's got a gorgeous-looking jump shot. He and McIver are coming on really strong, and I think their ability to impact the game with on-ball defense especially is going to be a strong selling point. I think it's going to get them more and more playing time on the floor. I am interested to see how these minutes are divvied up, especially as you get Bemba back in the mix. The nice thing is you have some positional versatility with guys like Augie and Jorgensen and Bemba, who can kind of be, 4 or the 5. Augie can kind of be 2 through 4, depending on what you're doing from a rotation standpoint. But I think that McIver and Jace Butler, you saw the way that they impact the game defensively. I also think athletically, those guys can get out and run on you, which I like. They can create offense at the rim, but they're also good, 3-point shooters. Jace Butler especially, I think, has a chance to be pretty lethal from beyond the arc. I like those guys, and I really liked what I saw from them in this game, and really the last couple of performances. I feel like they are trending in the right direction. I do wonder what that means for some guys like, Darnez Slater, who only played 1 minute in this one. It's kind of feeling like him and McConan might end up being the odd men out of the rotation when it's all said and done. I also think we maybe see a little bit of a reduced role for Joppa. He only had 5 minutes in this game as well. But the rotation is coming together. I like the mentality of the team. They have room to grow defensively. That's probably going to dictate what the team's ceiling ultimately is. But for a squad with this many newcomers to be embracing the offense as well as they have, and to be executing with the consistency that they have, has been intriguing on so many levels. One, the shot making has been awesome. I think the shot selection has been really encouraging as well. You've got multiple guys that are capable of creating for themselves, but are choosing to move the ball with consistency because they know they're likely going to get it back. It's a lot like what I say about the Nuggets. That type of offense becomes really fun to play. It becomes infectious, when you really are sharing the ball and everybody on the floor is willing to move it, because you're going to get a better look if you're just willing to keep it moving. And the Rams have an assist rate of 74.1 right now, assisting on 74.1 of their 74.1% of their made field goals, which is second best in college basketball. And I think this game against Loyola is a perfect indication of what makes this team so tough. You can't just key in on one guy defensively and take him away and then, boom, you're good. The Rams had 7 guys with 8+ points, 7 guys with multiple assists as well. There's strength in numbers. And I like that in different moments, different guys are able to feel the moment and know, like, hey, this is a stretch where I need to be aggressive, kind of like Kyle Jorgensen shooting the ball early on. 13 first half points. He continues to look like the most improved player in the Mountain West this season. But then in the second half, a guy like Rex Steiner comes out and he had 0 points in the first half, but he's unafraid to let it fly from 3. shows the skill on a couple of key drives and really nice touch. And again, I wrote in my post-game takeaways, and if you're not a DNVR diehard, I encourage you to subscribe, get access to not just all of my written content, but everything we've got going at DNVR. I wrote that he hit him with the finisher. Obviously, Rex Steiner's family, globally renowned for being wrestling royalty. If this was a pay-per-view event, this was WrestleMania and it was Loyola versus CSU, the tag team match, it was Rex Steiner who hit him with the finisher. I felt like his attitude, his swagger was really big after kind of a sluggish final 5 minutes offensively at the end of the first half. To have him come out firing the way that he did in the second half was really exciting. And I think it was, I want to be careful with my comparisons because I'm not saying he's Jamal Murray, but I think he is like Jamal Murray in a sense where he can score in bunches. The Murray flurries, and all of a sudden he's a 30-point quarter. You're not going to have that in college basketball, but he is a guy who can get real hot for you and have 12 points in 3 minutes or something like that. And his confidence seems to really be growing at CSU. Is kind of all over the place at Vatech. I think his ceiling in this system under Ali Farokhmanesh, especially if you can lean on McIver more and allow Rex Steiner to not always have to be a facilitator, a guy who can get some catch and shoot opportunities, kind of like what they did with Cayenne last year. Like Cayenne was technically the point guard, but a lot of the time, you had Neek facilitating things because Cayenne was so lethal as a 3-point shooter. And they even tried to do that for Zay a little bit. Like obviously Zay is as pure of a facilitator as it gets, basically a by the book definition point guard. But when you have guys that can shoot the ball like that, you want to try and create some instances where they're not having to make everything for themselves. And if you do that, you're going to allow them to score with far more consistency. And I think we're going to see some of that with CSU on Rex Steiner and kind of being a 1 at times, but being a 2 at times, especially as we see more and more of JoJo on the floor. And I think we'll see a lot of 3-4 guard lineups at times too, because again, guys like Jace Butler are so consistent on the defensive end, and he's knocking down shots now. 8 points, 2 or 3 from 3-point in this one, couple rebounds, couple assists, not afraid to do the little things. This team, they've got a lot of depth. They've got a lot of versatility. And I think we're kind of seeing guys start to iron out their roles now. Jace Butler, I'm really high on long-term, probably more of a 6-man this year. Has a chance to be a really dynamic starter for you for a couple of seasons if he stays in your program. JoJo, I'm incredibly high on, and I hope we're going to have the checkbook ready because he's going to get a lot of, high major interest. And I hate that that's even something we have to factor into the equation in modern college basketball. It is, but I think the exciting thing about CSU in this program moving forward is it's easier to sustain success because you sign, a couple of key transfers each year. You can keep on rolling. It's not like football where it can take 2-3 years to flip everything. Guys are going to want to play in the system because CSU has a track record of success and they have a track record of development. Players get better in this program. It's basically been the polar opposite of what we've seen from football over the last decade. And I think, Jorgensen is a great example of that, but even McIver and Butler and what we're seeing from them, and Rex Steiner after only, a half year in the program, the leap we've seen out of him has been really intriguing. I've always been pretty high on what Augie and what Pasquarelli were going to be in the system. I just felt like their game translated really naturally, and we've kind of seen that. And especially as Augie gets more and more healthy, I think we're just going to see him assume a larger role, and he's another guy who can probably help you establish a little bit more consistent presence in the paint. But it's been a really nice start in the non-conference, and obviously you're going to have to keep it going. I've seen some comments in the Toyota chat about it feels like it might be too good to be true. And I think that's just the CSU in us, and after what football put us through this year, the Ram life alerts are on high for all of us. I get that 100%. But I mean, these programs are two different things. Like look at what CSU did last year. Look at what they've done the last couple of years. I think that they have earned the respect, or they should have, and that's why I ranted so much about them being undervalued in the preseason. And maybe they aren't going to win the league, but I can damn sure say they're not going to finish 7th. And I like this team's potential to be right there in the mix in the league, especially if San Diego State continues to have to deal with some bad injury luck. You never know what could happen. Utah State looks really good as well. But they have firmly been a top 3 team in the Mountain West, I would say, to begin the season. And you're going to need to perform well in the MTE, win over Virginia Tech. You likely get St. Mary's after that. Metrics wise, that'd be huge for the schedule. You definitely have to take care of business against DU and CU and those final home games. But you have put yourself in a position here to potentially have a little bit more slack going into the league slate, which is good because you're going to have a tough start with, going to GCU and Nevada and some of these games you've got right out of the gate in the league slate. If they can continue to elevate defensively, if they can continue to get these guys in the mix, then hopefully going to have Bemba back at some point. I mean, they're 27-5 when he plays 15 plus minutes in his career. I don't see why the expectation shouldn't be for this program to be an NCAA tournament team. The coaching is good enough. The athletes are good enough. The depth is there. The mentality is there. You don't have any locker room issues. You don't have bad character guys. This team is a lot of fun. And I think it's going to be a really fun ride these next 3-4 months. So enjoy the process, man. We need it. We deserve it after everything that we have been through. It'll be exciting to see what Rex Steiner does against his old team. I see a couple of comments in the Toyota chat about Rex Steiner revenge game. Would love to see it. I'll be in Moby Friday night with coverage there. Obviously, we'll have Boise takeaways. We'll try and get some type of written piece out on football this week as well. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your order. Much love, y'all. We are always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.